So our topic, the 4 skills a meditator needs to cultivate. We're on the 4th one, the first 3 being cultivate deepening presence, right? The ability to be present. Everything rests on that foundation. If we're not present, all bets are off. If we're not present, what we're doing is blindly being led by whatever mind state is present in the moment. And you've meditated, you've closed your eyes. Do you want to roll that dice? Do you want to be led by whatever mind state might happen to be present in the moment? I don't. So, very important. So, first skill, just being present. Work training ourselves to be less distracted. And we can do it. It takes time. It takes a long time. Now, I wasn't being cute and funny when I said 10 years, when I said in the beginning. This is rest of your life. Second skill, moving closer to experience. So, we're present, we can connect with life, we can connect with experience. Can we move closer to it? Can we learn something about it? Or maybe even about what our relationship to it is. Well, I like this, I don't like that. Okay. So being more intimate, you might say, with it, which of course rests upon being able to be present with it. If I want to get to know you, I have to hang out with you. I have to be with you. I can't be somewhere else. So, and then one of the curious one for some people, the third one being skill, the ability, the both to know when and how to move away from experience. That's odd. Well, I thought we were just moving towards it. Life is intense. And we've all developed really good coping mechanisms that keep us with some thick skin. You could say armored the heart, etc. That kind of like, so we're not as buffeted by it. And that can be helpful in again, dampening down some of the difficulties, but the cost is that we're not so connected to each other, to life, to ourselves. We're dulled out. And so in our meditation practice, we're actually, whether we want to or not, if we keep with it, we are getting more and more open. Our hearts open, they just do. We connect with life more deeply, more intimately. And if you stay on this path and keep doing that, at some point you're going to connect with life and it's going to be really hard. And not just hard, but at least for sometimes, too much. Just too much. Can't, overwhelmed, don't have the resources to actually be with it. And so when it's like that, we have to know when is the right time, when it's too much, and then when it is, how. How do we move away? And that's what we talked about last couple months. Very important. If you follow this path, 100% sure you will need this skill at some point. Guarantee it. Not just no, I don't think that'll happen. Yes, it will. So we need to know how to navigate that. And then the 4th skill, which we'll start to talk about tonight, the teacher that taught this, Akincano, called it keeping the 3 universals in mind. What does that mean? That means that everything, all things in this world have a similar nature to them. Some of them have unique natures. They all have unique natures, like that's hard and that's kind of soft. This is flexible, this is rigid, this is round, this is square, that's bright, that's outside is dark, right? So individual characteristics, yeah? But all things share 3 common characteristics. Everything. There's nothing outside of this, both in body and in mind. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, the interior life, and everything that happens in the physical world as well. They all share these three characteristics, and they are that things change. They are changing. There's nothing that isn't constantly changing. There's nothing you can find in this universe that isn't always displaying that. Yeah? So that's pretty easy, at least intellectually. When it's really happening, then sometimes we make a fuss when we don't want it to happen, right? But at least intellectually we get it. The second one being, the Pali word is dukkha, translations unsatisfactory, vulnerable, inconstant, unreliable. Then of course one of the translations, suffering. And again, and it's precisely because things are changing that they're unreliable. We can't rely on things to stay the same because they can't. We'd have to be in a different universe. And therefore, we're vulnerable. Anything can happen at any time. My wife and I get on the highway, coming here. As soon as we got on the highway, got up to speed, boom, accident in front of us. It seemed like people were fine, but intense accident. Change, that's vulnerability, so this is, and everything is displaying that. You know, the Zen master holds up their favorite teacup, and they go, this cup is already broken. Yeah, that's keeping that second universal in mind. I cannot rely on this to not break. It's going to break. It has to break at some point. Or get lost, or something. So, and then the third one being the Pali word anatta, translated as not self. It's not no self. It's not about no self. It's about not self. And in a real nutshell, and we'll go into it much more when we get to this one, it's that everything is interconnected. Nothing is hanging out by itself separate from everything else. There's no separate you. There's no separate me. There's no separate lamp. These are just convenient concepts that we place on reality to help us all navigate it in the same way. Very helpful to do, but also somewhat limiting. And there's a way that we can connect with reality in a much deeper and more fundamental and essential way than the conventional reality of concepts. And everything is displaying that, because everything is constantly connected to and responding to and also affecting everything else. Everything is displaying that. So these are the three. And that can sound kind of like a little far out, except maybe change. But one way it might be helpful to understand this is that this is just the nature of things. It's just how things are. And a really good analogy to use is gravity. Yeah? It's pretty far out, gravity. I mean, things don't float, they stay down. And again, if you've been in outer space, you would know that this isn't always the case. But it's just the nature of the way things are. It's the nature of this striker. When I release it, its nature is going to be to go down, not up. I could do this 1 billion times, and every time it's going to go down, because that's its nature. It's the nature of a redwood to grow straight and tall. It's never going to be like short and like the pitch pines on the Cape. It's never going to look like that. It's always going to be straight and tall. It's the nature of water to run downhill. It's never going to go uphill, ever. Its nature is to find the lowest point, etc., etc. So these are just the nature of the way things are. They're not like esoteric Buddhist teachings. It's very, very simple. Does that make sense? And we can understand them that way. And just in terms of like with gravity, we can know these three characteristics as deeply and as fully as we know gravity. You don't have to think about gravity, do you? Right? When you come to a step, your weight naturally goes on the other leg, carries the body weight, so you can step down. Because you know, and again, not to intellectually, that you're going to get pulled down to that next step. And so just, you know that so fully that the body just responds and does what it needs to do to be congruent, yeah, with gravity. You come to the edge of a cliff, there's a response. There's this congruence with the nature of gravity. We live with it, yeah? And because we're congruent, can you imagine if you weren't congruent with gravity? Literally, in very short period of time, and it may be a matter of seconds, 30 seconds, certainly if you got up, within 5 or 10 seconds, you would really be having a problem. Well, it's the same way with these characteristics. When we're not congruent with them, when we're not in tune with the nature of things, we run into difficulty. I.e., in Buddhist terms, we suffer. Because we don't know them. We don't know them the way we know gravity. We don't know them like this is just the air that I breathe. But it is just the air that you breathe. These three characteristics are basically what's happening. But we don't know them, and therefore, it's like being in a dark room at night with no light. You're just crashing into stuff, stubbing your toe, things are breaking. That's what happens in our life to the degree that we're not in line with these characteristics. But they're not something far out. Yeah?
This is just kind of an intellectual point, but the first one, change, is intrinsic in the object itself, whatever it may be.
In anything, yes.
It is changing.
Yes.
Okay. And the third one, the interconnected, that is true. I mean, everything's made of molecules, etc.
Yeah.
But the second one, the dukkha, is something that is a product of our perception.
Well, it's relevant to us.
It's not something that the bowl is not suffering.
No.
The bowl, the changeability of the bowl makes us perceive dukkha through the bowl. But the bowl itself doesn't have that intrinsic. No, exactly. So it's just kind of like a different...
Yeah, a little bit. It's our relationship to it, right?
But I mean, it relies upon human perception.
Yes.
To be universal.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. And you could say, so dukkha, it's unsatisfactory. Unsatisfactory to what? Right. To our desire for deep happiness. So it needs us to be in relationship with it in order for it to be that way.
And the other two don't.
They
are just there.
Yeah, you could see it that way. Yeah. Okay. So I really want to underscore that this is natural. This is just the nature of things. It's not some far out thing that we need to meditate for 30 years and then maybe we'll get a glimpse of. It's actually, as Akincano said, keeping the three universals in mind, meaning walking through our life with them as our, even intellectual, as our understanding of how things are. Because when we do, or to the degree that we do, is to the degree that there is not a problem. So for instance, when the Buddha's two best friends died in the same year, he said to his attendant and cousin Ananda, he said, it's like the sun and the moon have gone out of the sky. So he knew loss. Just because he was a Buddha doesn't mean that they were here, now they're not here. There is loss, right? We are in this world of change. But the next sentence he said, and he referred to himself as the Tathagata, one thus gone, meaning like gone over to the other shore, gone beyond suffering, gone beyond birth and death. So the next sentence he said, it's like the sun and the moon gone out of the sky, and isn't it amazing that the Tathagata does not suffer over this? Because he was so fully congruent with the truth, the natural law of change, that of course they're going to die. Of course they're going to. How could they not? Not as an intellectual, but as a deep body, full being, knowing the way we know gravity.
When I'm struggling, I know what you're saying, and what I'm struggling with is the whole process of grief.
Mm-hmm.
When you lose somebody very dear to you.
Yeah.
How does that go into?
Well, I think, again, there's loss, right? And there can be sadness over loss. But the layer, what can be the difficult layer, and this is just language. Do you want to call this grief? What is grief? But there can be the sadness, let's say, or let's just say a sense of loss, right? Which is challenging and difficult, right? Where it gets really difficult or really challenging is when there is some understanding, some view in our mind. Again, this would be not even conscious, but views are mostly unconscious, and that shouldn't have happened. Somehow that shouldn't have happened. Somehow this is outside of what should happen. This should not happen. Then now we're really suffering.
So it's like a resistance.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that's the difference. Yeah. Yep. And he knew, of course, it should happen. It has to happen. Right? Summer has to go. If you haven't noticed, right? It has to. It's all right. But you can see if you resist it, you can see the feeling, right?
Second arrow.
So who said that? Yes, the teaching of the second arrow. Sometimes difficult things happen, but then the way we respond or more likely react to them, if it's not skillful, then we pile on more difficulty. And there's a teaching about it's like being shot with an arrow, and then and it hurts, and then you take another one and shoot yourself with it. Yeah. But that's what we do. Yeah.
Want to hear a 30-second story?
Sure.
The body's exactly what you're talking about, not as theory, but reality.
Yes.
Two Tibetan Lamas that I know, one of them passed away. There was an event where the Tibetan Holocaust was spoken of. 2 and 3 million Tibetans who were slaughtered by the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
That took place. So I'm had the great privilege of having breakfast with them the next morning after this event. And I said to Kenshin, the older brother Lama, and by the way, the whole family was slaughtered except for their father. Father got him out alive. The rest of the family, sisters, mother, all killed. So I said, I forget exactly how did you deal with this? What's 2 or 3 million of your countrymen slaughtered? There happened to be a stainless steel bowl there. We had some food in it, whatever. He said, before this happened, the teaching was all encompassed like water inside this bowl. And when the Chinese did what they did, it was like a bowling ball dropped into the bowl. And the teaching went over there. And they just looked at me and laughed and smiled. Endlessly. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I got it.
Yeah.
He felt so scarring grief when it happened.
Sure. Yeah. So that's what's possible. But it doesn't, don't think that the thing is to be not feeling. Remember, because the Buddha said it's like the sun and the moon went out of the sky. But when we are in tune with the nature of things, then we're not, someone said resisting, or the second arrow, then we're not heaping on difficulty because we're not fighting. We know how things are. And again, this knowing, it's like when you were sitting, knowing the body. Not some visual in your mind of the body sitting there, but actually feeling it, connecting with it deeply. And it's the same with these characteristics. We want to, of course, know them intellectually, that's helpful, but through practice and basically through being deeply present, we can know them on a deeper level. I told you this story about the night light here when I was on a retreat last fall. No? Well, this is just a little example. And again, it comes from being present. Remember the first skill? Have to be present. So I was on a long retreat last fall. So I'm walking down one of the dormitory hall to my room, just doing walking meditation, present. There was a window up here. It's like in the afternoon, a little late in the afternoon, so it was getting darker. And there was a night light on the wall, the kind that turn on automatically when it gets dark enough. So it must have been just like right on the edge, because when I walked past it, when I got between the window and the night light, it went on. And when I walked past it, it went off. And in that moment, all the teachings were present. They were just there. Because, usually we can come through any one of these three doorways. So these three characteristics, they are all just different facets of the same truth. Like if you had a light that went through a prism and it went out in like green, blue, orange, yeah? But it's like, okay, there's that, but it's just the light, right? It's no different. So same with these three things. There's change, there's unsatisfactoriness, there's not self. Okay, boom, boom, boom. But they're just different expressions of the truth, of how things are. And sometimes, and they all contain one another. Each of these contain one another. Sometimes in a moment, we'll go through the door of change, and the other two will automatically be known. Sometimes we'll go through the door of unsatisfactoriness, and the other two will also be known, etc. So in that moment, when the night light came on, it was not self. It was so clear that, we use the concept, light, but it didn't exist by itself. It came into existence dependent on me walking by at that moment. It was completely dependent on me. That light and I were totally not separate. So we can know these. Again, this is not levitating in a cave in the Himalayas. This is not esoteric teachings. I mean, not self is pretty radical in terms of world religions and spirituality. It's pretty much the only spiritual system that contains it, that contains that, there's no bottom to the rabbit hole. You don't ever land anywhere solid. So that's pretty unique and pretty radical, but they're still just how things are, just simply how this universe operates. And so this fourth skill is can we start to first intellectually and then slowly more and more experientially become congruent with these truths. And the idea is the more that we do, the less we resist, the less we suffer. So this first universal characteristic of change, the Pali word, by the way, Pali is the language that the teachings were first written down in. There was an oral tradition for about 400 years after the Buddha's death, yes, just handed down through, because written language was very, very rare, if almost non-existent. This is a long time ago. This was 600 years before Christ was born. It's a very long time ago. So when they finally did write down the teachings, it was in the language called Pali, which is like a first cousin to Sanskrit, the way Spanish or Italian would be to Latin. anicca. You know, we use the word change and we say, okay, I know change, okay, next. And the profundity of change is, we have to go deeper to know it. On the kind of the present way we live our lives and our present kind of level of attention does not ascertain the profundity of the truth of change. And to help kind of, at least intellectually, kind of raise the grain on that and bring that to light, I want to introduce a teaching to you, or again, it's not just a teaching, it's how things actually happen. It's called dependent co-arising. Sounds kind of neat, doesn't it? So you can go home and tell people, I learned about dependent co-arising tonight. And the words actually speak to the teaching. Everything is dependent on everything else, and everything is arising together and passing away with everything else. So dependent co-arising together. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything happens dependent on everything else. So let's just take a few things as an example. One thing I noticed, so just a few moments ago, you were standing up, or most of you were, and then you sat down, right? Well, that didn't just happen. That happened dependent on a bunch of other things, right? It happened dependent on me deciding it was time to start again. If I hadn't decided it was time to start again, you'd still be standing and talking. It happened dependent on me ringing the bell. Me ringing the bell was dependent on that someone didn't come and walk away with it. You sitting down happened dependent on your back not going out and not being able to get into the seated position, etc., etc., etc. And we could keep going with that till your sitting down was dependent on everything that's ever happened in the universe. So dependent co-arising. Everything arises when the conditions are dependent on it too. Right? So the sun rises when the conditions are present or are supportive of it. One is it's still burning, it didn't go out. Another is that the earth has turned enough so that it's going to start to come up over the horizon. Yeah? Everything is happening dependent on all other things. That wasn't the best example. But that's just half of it. Because in turn, while that thing is arising, dependent on other things happening, that itself is a happening that is the causes for something else to arise. And it's all happening simultaneously. So this is what when we say the word change and when we say the word anicca, this is what we're talking about. Not just like I changed my mind. It's the word life and the word change are two different words, but the reality that they're describing is the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. And of course, change doesn't mean things arising, it means them passing away. The Buddha said, whatever has the nature, remember we're talking about nature, whatever has the nature to arise also has the nature to pass away. There's no such thing that just has the nature to arise. Is there? Can you think of anything? Or I'll challenge you. Think of something that only has the nature to arise and not pass away. Why? Because that's its nature. It has to. The redwood has to grow tall and straight.
Silence. Silence.
Oh, silence is always arising and passing away. I stop talking. I start talking. Pass away. It's gone.
The Dharma.
The Dharma being known arises and passes away. Yeah? That what makes a Buddha is that the Dharma was lost. It's not known. The difference between a Buddha and an Arahant is that a Buddha wakes up at a time when the Dharma was not known and rediscovers it, whereas an Arahant or any other being wakes up at a time when the teachings are known. But the Dharma itself, what is the Dharma? There's no such thing. That's a concept. What is it describing? The Dharma, what is it describing? Anicca, anatta, dukkha, which is flux. So remember, concepts freeze what is in motion.
How about the universe itself? I mean, it's in the process of arising, but it's the entirety of it is not. It's expanding.
Well, I don't know. I don't know the universe.
Well,
we think we know.
Science has proven that multiple times in different ways.
Some of it does. The whole thing
I know, I'm
doesn't
talking
do
about
it.
the universe as a single.
But isn't it changing? So you're saying it's expanding.
Oh, it's changing.
So it's changing.
Huh?
So it's a rising thing?
I'm just.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get what you're saying.
I'm just relying upon what I read about cosmology.
Yeah. So you could say that, okay, we're here for me, 55 years.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, that didn't change. Oh, yes, it did. Every second, every millisecond it's changing. So you could say, well, the universe just is, but it's constantly changing.
It is changing.
Yeah.
But
So, and it's arising and passing.
It's arising, it's getting bigger, it's getting larger, it's expanding.
Right.
Okay, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Let me explain.
Okay.
In its current condition of expansion, it
Yes.
arises into that, and then the next moment, it's bigger, so that just passed away. It's momentary. It's just momentary. Yes, and there is the doorway to anatta.
Okay.
We could say the universe.
So the current state of the universe changes into something else, even though it's bigger and, okay.
Yes. Everything is always arising and passing away. It's momentary. We live in the world of concepts, so we get stumped. Well, what about the universe? And when we get locked on concepts, we're in freeze mode. Because concepts freeze what is actually in flux. But again, the brain needs to do that in order for us to inhabit this reality. There's nothing that is not arising and passing away. And that's just from this vantage point. Take out a quantum microscope or get the mind really concentrated, and you're going to see arising and passing on a level that is so small and so quick that the substantiality of everything just disappears. And all there is flux. And there is no thing to arise and pass away because it's clear there is no thing. It's just the tiniest particles imagined, whatever science calls them, whatever the Dharma calls them, that are infinitely quickly rising and passing away.
They pop in and out of existence.
Yes. Dependent on everything else popping in and out of existence. So when we say the word change, I wanted to give you a little sense, again, even intellectually, of what we're pointing at. The profundity, the depth, the omnipresence, would that be a way to use that word? Of it. It's just what's happening. And sometimes we can get a sense of that. And just to say, with these three characteristics, when we start to feel into them and know them, there can often be a big fear, a bouncing back. It's like, that's not how I know things. That's not the universe I live in. Well, yes, it is. It's just you weren't seeing it that way. So sometimes it can be quite startling and even fearful to start to see things the way they actually are, But if you keep doing it over time, then it becomes less, you get like desensitized and, oh, yeah, that's that. So this is what we mean when we mean change, this level of change.
It's something that's come to my mind lately these days about my own impermanence, all that. It's my skin. Everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything arises and different every day. And I get quite a lot of delight about it. I know one of my own nephews said, "Why do you need old skin?" And I just loved it. I thought, I think it was his way of saying everybody does, but I don't know. Why do you need old skin? So that's very helpful for me on a daily basis, just to look and say, okay, well, it's like that today. It's like this. And so.
Yeah. Here's an interesting exercise that I would encourage you all to do at least once. It only takes a day. Really, it only takes one day, one waking day, and you will be amazed. And that is, get a phone, a watch, a beeper, something that will alert you every 30 minutes. Carry around a little notebook with you for that day, and when it goes off, immediately notice your mind state. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm rushing to work, I'm bored, whatever, and write it down. Just be, there's no right or wrong, just be very honest and clear. Just write it down and do that for the day and then look. Well, who am I? And the level of change is just amazing. But do it. You have to do it and look and see it. You have to, because again, this has to be our own experience, not what I'm saying or what anyone's saying. We always got to know it in our own experience. And this is just a great way. For some reason, it really brings it home. So it's not hard to do. So when we keep the three universals in mind, when we keep change in mind, we just start to look through that filter. It's 8:30 now. When we started, it was 8:20. When we restarted, it changed. What do you know about that? It's nighttime now. Just a couple hours ago, the sun was out. It was light. When I drove here, I was a little over full. I was kind of feeling like, ugh. And now I don't. That changed. I was tired when I first came here. I didn't sleep last night, hardly. But I'm an extrovert, so when I get with people, I get energy. Now I'm not tired anymore. Again, you don't have to, we're not levitating here. This is just very simple, but consciously doing it. Look, remember, keeping the three universals in mind. Keep it in mind, keep change in mind, and you start to see everything. Carla's eyes were closed, and then they were open, and then they were closed. We call it blinking, but it's change. It's change. It's just change. We can do that, and it's very simple. We can do it in our daily life, and we can do it more precisely and more intimately when we're quiet and still. So let's do that. Let's do our sitting practice. So I'm not going to give the same instructions as before. Just be with your meditation object, breath or the body. Start by connecting with the body. And so right away, even the body, those sensations that you feel, those tinglings, those vibratings, if you just get quiet and let the attention be with them, and you see tiny, tiny points of sensation quickly rising and passing away. And then we use the concept vibration, buzzing, etc., vibrating. We start out to sit, the sit bones are comfortable. 10 or 15 minutes into it, change. They become uncomfortable. The attention is on the breath. Change. The attention's lost in thought. Change. The attention comes back. We wake up. The breath comes in, change, the breath goes out. The beginning of the breath, in-breath changes to the middle of the in-breath, changes to the end of the in-breath, changes to the gap between the in-breath and the out-breath, changes to the beginning of the out-breath, etc. The bottom of the right foot becomes predominant in our attention, and then change happens, and the hands become predominant in terms of what we're feeling. The sensations in the hands are kind of neutral, and then they change and perhaps become pleasant or unpleasant. We use the concept fan, or we say, I'm hearing the air conditioning system. If we pay attention, it's not just one sound. Many, many different sounds quickly coming and going. We are interested in the topic and noticing change while we're sitting, and then change happens and we become bored. Here's a little exercise that you can do. Let's bring your attention to the body if it's not already there. Maybe just to a touch point, sit bones or the feet, and connect with the changing sensations. Now widen your attention so that it fills the whole body. And so if I were to say to you, feel your whole body all at once, what would that be like? Widen the attention so that it fills the whole body. And what we call body simply becomes this field of changing sensations. And perhaps even without such sharp, definitive outlines between inside and outside of the body. Let go of the concept of body and be present with what you can know directly. Changing sensations. There is no body. It's just a concept. And whatever you notice, kind of frame it within change. Try to even stay out of concepts. So we hear sound, someone moving. No, just changing sounds. Even breath, no, just changing sensations. Even thoughts. What are thoughts? That's a concept. Changing images in the mind. Changing sounds in the mind. There's a way that we can really relax, rest back, open, be receptive, and just allow this change to happen, just to allow life to kind of dance and just be there for it without needing it to be different, without clinging, without suffering. Did anyone notice change? So just to say, this teachings right here, it's kind of called the classic Theravada deconstructive path. We deconstruct everything down to its finest part, so we can see how things actually are. And when the mind sees how things actually are, it stops grasping, it stops clinging. And when it stops grasping, it stops clinging, it stops suffering. So that's the kind of like, okay, great, so what? So the three universal characteristics, why? Well, this is, again, the classic Theravada path. See things as they actually are, actually deconstruct things, get below the conceptual level, and to the degree that we do that is the degree that the mind sees there's nothing to grab onto and stops trying, and all is well. Then the other thing is just to say, so we can say, oh, it's the nature of things. Like let's be in accord with the nature of things, and we think that's good. I want that. I like that. That's a good thing. Yeah, and it is. It absolutely is. But one thing we need to understand is it doesn't mean it's going to be pleasant. You remember the movie The Matrix? He said, I'm not promising you anything, just the truth. Right? Such a great movie. Those guys had to have been Dharma practitioners. There's no way that movie could not have been informed by the Buddha Dharma. It was just too spot on. So, change, right, can be hard. Whether it's the waning summer, whether it's our own waning life, whether it's losing beings that are dear to us, whether they are our animal friends or our human friends, it can be challenging. And as we explore the other two characteristics, we'll explore just how challenging it can be. We think we're on board with change, and to some degree we are, but we're not on board with the profundity of change, because we still get surprised by it, and we still resist it. And if there were like 5 practices that you could do that I think of all the practices you could do, there would be 5. I think this would be one of them. And that is, whenever you find yourself suffering, when you're pissed off, you're frustrated, whatever, whenever you come up for air and realize that's happening, you're with your partner and they're like, you can't believe what an idiot they are, and just whatever, if you can remember, oh, okay, I'm suffering, which that in itself, just to know that, you're doing well. But then look and see what change is happening that you're not noticing and that you're resisting. It'll be there, I guarantee it. I guarantee it. What change aren't you noticing that's happening, and how are you resisting it?
It's been a year of change for us, and I have a little 3x5 card next to my bed, and it says, welcome whatever arises. And I look at that in the morning and at night. And then in my journal I'll write down, well, did I welcome that? I mean,
All right.
It's been fabulous.
Yes. That's keeping the universal in mind. We're keeping it in mind. I've said this before. The monastics, the nuns and the monks, they chant twice a day for 20 minutes, half an hour, twice a day, every day, no matter what. They're keeping them in mind. they're just, yes. That's why they do it. Notice when you're suffering, if you notice, see what change is happening that you weren't fully conscious of, and how you're resisting it. Check it out. I mean, something as simple. I was noticing this today. I was like coming up to an intersection, and I wasn't there yet, and I just kind of looked, and there were no cars coming, so it's like, good, good. And then I got up there, and then there was like 3 cars there. And this is minor. This is. But when we get to dukkha, we're going to talk about the profundity of it and the different variations of it. But there were 3 cars there, and it was like, not so fine. This was not as fine as it was just a little bit ago, right? What happened? Change. There were no cars, and now there are cars. That's all that happened. And I'm resisting it, because what? I want what I want. I want to pull out. The self wants what it wants. It wants its own way. Again, this is minor, but we can notice it. We can notice it. And that little moment of just like, just the tiniest, the mind contracting. I want it to be different. I want it to be different. When I was on retreat last fall, I came up with a little saying, for the mind, not this. Not this. When the mind contracts and goes, not this. Something else, not this. How often do we do that? So anyways, you get the point. Yeah. Good. And so, like Carla was saying, we can actually do things. I gave you one thing to do about noticing when you're suffering, which will be often. So you have plenty of opportunities. Again, even in small ways, this is a chance to notice change. Write little things, put them up. Notice change. There's all sorts of things you can do to help to keep this universal in mind. And the more we do, the more we get congruent with it. The more we get congruent with it, the less we resist it. So, good enough?
Yes.
Good to be with you.